If you're anything like me, then Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith is your favorite Star Wars movie. Now, it's really hard for me to pick on that because Star Wars is one of my favorite movie franchises, but it's one of those situations like, hey, gun to my head, what's my favorite Star Wars movie? I'm gonna pick Revenge of the Sith. And considering the fact that, one, I was still a young kid when Revenge of the Sith was in theaters, but two, it was also that era where every single big movie at the time was getting some sort of licensed tie-in movie game. Yeah, I was one of those kids. I was always all over the movie games. Now, not only was I all over the PS2 version of this game back in the day, but I was also all over the Game Boy Advance version of Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. Of all the versions of the game, I would say that I have, a good bit of nostalgia for both the PS2 and GBA version, but there's something about this GBA version specifically that feels just even more slightly nostalgic even though they came out around the same time. Maybe it's because this version of the game specifically really harkens back to that SNES era of games, which, if you know my history, playing Donkey Kong Country on the SNES is the first vivid memory that I have from my life. So, maybe there's just some extra nostalgia there because it feels like a game from that era. Before we go on with the jib job, we'll just go ahead and get in the game here. Just name the file AAA. We'll go ahead and play as Anakin as well. And this game does not, it doesn't waste your time. It just gets straight into the thick of things, much like other Star Wars games. It starts out with the title crawl and everything like that, and I'm probably gonna have to keep the volume at a relatively low level in this video just due to music and such, because, for those that don't know the Star Wars, if you put any Star Wars music in your video, more likely than not, you're gonna get copyright striked into oblivion. Even though the music that's playing right now, which you can probably hear it ever so slightly, is playing in that, like GBA sound font, I feel like it would still be enough to possibly get me in trouble. But anyway, Master Obi-Wan Kenobi and Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker go to rescue Chancellor Palpatine, who has been taken hostage by General Grievous and his droid army. It was just an indication of what's to come. Thanks for saving my life again. You're welcome, Master. Yet again. Remember, Anakin, that business on Cato Nemoidia doesn't count. Master, we've got company. This is where the fun begins. ... Scene 1. I have a bad feeling about this. Man, I love the dialogue in this game. Obviously, it's all text-based and there's no voice acting, but I don't know. There's a level of nostalgic charm to it. Anyway, you get into the game and the controls are pretty simple because the GBA only really had 4 main buttons that you could play games with on top of, like the D-pad. So, you got your jump, you got your punch, and then you also have your force and saber abilities that you use the bumpers for, but, they'll kind of teach you that as you go on, but this is essentially, if you've ever played, like, Turtles in Time, this is essentially that, but Star Wars. This is what you call a good old beat-em-up in the fashion of, like, Double Dragon or Streets of Rage, or like I mentioned before with Turtles in Time. Now, this is one of my favorite video game genres right here, and you guys know me. I play literally every genre of video game. I just love playing video games in general, but I will say, there's just something about these 2D, side-scrolling beat-em-ups that I've always been drawn to. You can block opponents' blasters, and that's where the surprising amount of death comes into this game. So when they go to shoot, you click the bumper and you can either block it, or if you hit it right before it hits, you can actually parry it in a way and send it back to them, which does become, I don't want to say like a core feature of the game later on. Like, you don't need to be very good at parrying to get through the game, like, especially if you're playing on the easiest difficulty or something, but I will say that it will help you greatly, especially with some of the boss fights and such, being able to parry and block certain moves and get good with your timings and such. There's also a lot of variations with your moves, so for example, if you just like stand still and start mashing the button, you have a certain combo that you'll do there, but if you're holding the D-pad down while you go to attack, then it gives you like a different kind of combo. So there's a lot of depth built into this game that you wouldn't necessarily expect just from looking at it on its surface. Now, something I was going to mention before I started to, cut myself off when the dialogue started and all that, was that this game wasn't actually only released on the GBA, or this specific version of the game, I should say, rather, because obviously you have the PS2 and Xbox version of the game, the console version of the game, but this game was also on the DS. However, there is a slight difference between this and the DS version. So, while obviously, the DS version has 2 screens, on top of also having some bonus, starship levels. Oh yeah, here we go. We got Vader's Wrath ready. Just plunge the saber into the ground. It's an awesome screen wipe ability. But anyways, yeah, on top of the starship levels that the DS version has, since the DS obviously isn't restricted by that GBA sound font, they were able to just put like the straight up Star Wars music into it, which, don't get me wrong, obviously the normal Star Wars music sounds great, but there's something about the GBA sound font where, it really plays into that like 16-bit aesthetic and vibe to where I actually prefer playing the GBA version of this game simply for the music alone. Sure, is there technically a little less content because of the starship levels? Yes, but if I'm gonna be honest, as much as I love the starship levels, and they are a lot of fun to play, there's something about playing the GBA version specifically where it's only like the 16-bit aesthetic, because when you do the starship levels, they're a bit of like that like pseudo 3D. I don't want to necessarily say that they look like Star Fox, but that's like the closest thing that I could probably compare it to where it's not exactly 16-bit, but it's also not completely fully 3D either. Like, it's still kind of polygonal and a little pixely in a way, but there's just something about the GBA version where it's that completely unashamed, just full-on 16-bit 2D side-scrolling beat 'em up with that nostalgic sound font. So it all just really comes together there. But hey, and neither way of playing this game is wrong. You know, both are completely valid. They're both basically the same game. The only differences again being the starship levels and the sound font. It's just one of those personal preference things. Plus, it is also worth mentioning that I had the GBA version back in the day, but I played it mainly on my DS since this did come out after the DS had already come out. Is that all? Where's the challenge? And then the first boss comes up, which, I mean, it's not that difficult of a thing, but you know, it still has a bit more health than the other enemies, so I guess we can call it a boss. That's what I like about those droids. They never quit. So then you got the first boss coming in here, and yeah, it's pretty easy speasy. You just gotta kind of force push some of these bombs back at him, or you can jump up and slash him. There's a few different attacks that this boss will do, but you know, all around it's pretty easy. Comes in for the low attack, and then after you do enough damage, it'll go to the second phase of sorts where it'll start coming in with the lasers, and then from there you can get even more easy damage on it by trying to, you know, hit it in its weak point, its head right there, get it a couple times, even after it goes off screen. And once he comes back in, I'm actually going to go ahead and pull off my Vader's Wrath since that is ready, and unfortunately, it did not hit him. Okay, so from there, we've already hit him like 5 times, I think, in this phase. We're almost there, baby. Jump up from behind, which is a really good way to avoid some of the laser damage, and there we go. The first boss is down. Again, it's not a hard boss by any means, but it's a great introductory into how the bosses work in this game, where they're going to have certain patterns, certain weak points you got to look out for. So again, there's a lot of buried depth in this game that you wouldn't necessarily expect just from looking at it on the surface, but at the same time, if you have experience with games like this, or Streets of Rage, or Turtles in Time, then you would already know to expect that, because those are also games that have a surprising amount of depth in them, especially when it comes to the boss's moves and such. But, well, that wasn't too bad. Let them send more. We'll show them. It's all fun and games until someone gets hurt. And knowing you, Master, what are you trying to insinuate? Nothing, Master. Nothing at all. I'm sure. Let's find the Chancellor. And that is the first mission down. And then at the end of every mission, you can, you know, use all the points that you accumulated depending on how you did, how well you did with defeating enemies and such, and how fast you completed the mission. So we'll just go ahead and we'll put it into the saber throw. Yeah, sure, why not? It's not like we're about to do a full playthrough or anything, but you know, we'll just put that in there. Then we can exit the customization, and we'll pump some more into the strength. Yeah, do some more damage per attack. That sounds good to me. And on to the next level we go. Now, another really cool thing about this game is that if you remember at the beginning, I said you can choose between either Anakin or Obi-Wan, and it also has a thing saying like 0 out of 13 because you play through 13 missions per character. But if you've ever watched Revenge of the Sith, then you would know roughly halfway through, Anakin and Obi-Wan go their separate ways. Obi-Wan goes to hunt for Grievous, Anakin goes off to, you know, do his own thing. So at that point, you have Anakin's campaign, which goes on to do its own thing, and then Obi-Wan goes off to do his own thing, and that's why some of the boxes and the circles and such are kind of grayed out there. So even though at first it may be like, oh, there's only 13 levels in the game, no, there's actually 13, 6, 19, about 21 different levels in the game, not to mention the fact that some different things can happen in each of the levels just depending on who you're playing as well. So yeah, again, not to sound like a broken record, but a surprising amount of depth in a game that doesn't look like it would have that much depth to it. I sense Dooku. I sense a trap. What's our next move? Spring the trap. But first, let's find a way out of this corridor. Meet me at the other end. And Anakin, try to be careful. Of course, Master. Scene 2. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Same thing as the first stage. You just start out whacking these guys. And also, it is worth mentioning that it does take you through the entirety of Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. So, even though this game isn't that long necessarily, each playthrough only takes about maybe an hour and a half, absolutely tops if you're struggling or if it's like your first time playing. So, but like at absolute most, playing through both characters, it'll take you like 3 hours to basically 100% the game. But even then, you're able to replay it on harder difficulties, go back through and try to unlock all the cool abilities and such, and I would recommend doing that. Like, if it's one of those things where you play through it once, or you play through it with both characters, and you're like, man, I really want more, I would, oh shoot, I forgot about the layers earlier, jump over that, but I would recommend going back in and trying to beat on the hardest difficulty, trying to get all those skills, because there are so many fun ways to combine different abilities in this game, different combos you can utilize, different ways to take down droids, because while this game does tell you everything that you technically need to know, there's still so much for you to discover and experiment with, which also adds to the replayability, because, you know, even if you have like the manual for this game, there's still so much that you're able to just kind of like go off and figure out on your own just to see how everything works. Also, I mentioned before that this is a very 16-bit inspired game, but for those that don't know, this is just like a fun little quirky fact that really isn't relevant to this game or the video, but the GBA is actually a 32-bit system, so if, say, the hardware inside of the GBA was a bit more powerful, or if you would mod it for one reason or another to make it more powerful, which would obviously be like a convoluted process and would technically not even be a GBA anymore at that point, you could technically run like N64, like PS1 games on it if, you know, you went to those lengths. And again, I'm not even saying that the GBA is necessarily capable of running those games, I'm just saying that it's the same bit architecture, so then it would theoretically be possible within that 32-bit architecture. There's the exit, and now we're into the next corridor here. It's a whole lot of droids up ahead, but yeah, so I always thought that that was a pretty cool fact, and that's why you had a lot of games on the GBA that seemed surprisingly advanced at the time, no pun intended, actually no, all puns intended, where, you know, they were, whether it be like pseudo 3D games or games that were like actually 3D, or just games that had genuinely impressive graphics that seemed beyond what you'd expect from 16-bit, that would be why. Also, I apologize if I'm lacking in the skill department in this video. I am playing with a third-party Xbox One controller right now, so definitely a bit different from the GBA or even the DS Lite D-pad and buttons and controller layout and such. In fact, this is easily the worst playthrough I've probably ever had just in terms of sheer damage that I've taken so far, but it's okay, we're rocking with it. We're just here to have a fun time. I always loved how many different variations of droids there are in this game as well. You got some of the standard droids and some of the like dark brown / red droids, and you got some of the golden droids, and each one kind of indicates what they can do, what abilities they have and such. Like the gold ones will shock you, the normal ones will just, well, shoot you. Then you got the normal blue one, or the bigger blue ones, which will come in and blast you with a Buzz Lightyear looking arm blaster. So there's a lot of variety to the enemies in the game. Another thing I've always loved about this game is just the art style. Like, it's so beautiful, and while yes, the you know, the GBA was known to have some games where they were a bit oversaturated if you tried to play them with like a backlight or just on a display nowadays emulating it, because developers were accounting for the lack of backlight in the original Game Boy Advance and GBA SP AGS-001 model. So they would intentionally oversaturate or overbrighten their games just to account for that, just so they still look normal. Because, for example, if you play like Donkey Kong Country on the GBA on like an emulator, or if you play it on even like the AGS-101, it's gonna look a little bright, oversaturated. Some of the enemies will literally just be straight up purple in the game, to where if you play them on an original GBA or AGS-001, it's gonna look completely normal and almost identical to the original SNES version of the game. So, you know, this is one of those situations where it could be, I mean, honestly, when you play this game on either an original GBA or through emulation like this, I mean, it looks correct either way, and this was released at the point where the AGS-101 obviously did exist, but I don't know, there's just something about this game to where I don't find it to be a problem either way, because again, for some games like DKC, you might end up with purple enemies. The game still looks great, and you can still play it through an emulator, obviously, but for a game like this, the bright colors shine through just as well on an original GBA display, but then also playing it through an emulator, I mean, it just helps the beautiful colors pop even more, and neither one necessarily looks correct or incorrect. They just both look amazing, which is well, amazing. Fun fact about me, I love building pixel art in Minecraft, so I'm actually really tempted to try one of these times to just like take a screenshot of Anakin and like Obi-Wan and some of the droids standing still, and just like pull up those screenshots so I can actually like maybe build them as pixel art in Minecraft, because I mean, if you just break down the pixels and look at it right now, it honestly wouldn't be that hard to do. So I think that's something that I might attempt to do at some point, and I might just like post up a picture over on the community tab or on my Instagram, or post in my Discord server or something like that, because again, I love building pixel art, and this would be a pretty cool one to do, because it's totally feasible. We got a whole bunch of droids coming in here, but they ain't no match for me. I've been playing this game for almost 20 years. I actually feel a tear forming in my soul just left my body when it has not been that long. Where did the time go? Anyways, we're getting close to the end of the level here, so we got a few more ways of them coming in. Yeah, I always love that. You can just run up and straight up just kick them. Just screw the saber, you just kick them. But every time that Anakin or Obi-Wan do their little dance with the saber, that's how you know that, you know, you're at the end of the level. You know, Anakin will raise up his saber. Obi-Wan is close, and he's not alone. Dooku Which means, yes, the next level, you would fight Dooku, but I don't necessarily want to spoil that, because the boss fights in this game are really, really cool. So instead, I think we're going to leave things there just so you guys can kind of experiment and figure that out for yourself. I don't know, it is really tempting to keep going, but again, I don't want to spoil the surprises just in case any of you haven't played it before, and the Dooku fight would be a bit of a spoiler, because the boss fights are pretty epic in this game, so I think that's where we're gonna leave it for now. But anyways, I'd love to hear from you guys. Do you guys have nostalgia for either version of this game? Me personally, I have nostalgia for both the console version and the handheld versions of this game, especially the GBA one, as I mentioned before, because even going back to it to this day, having that classic 16-bit era sound font along with the visuals just really plays into the nostalgia factor there, and it's just... Again, I just love this genre of video games, like 2D side-scrolling beat-em-ups, so have you guys played this game before? Have you played the console version, but maybe not this version, or maybe it's a vice versa where you played this version and not the console one? Maybe you're gonna check it out after this, just whatever it is, whatever you're thinking, I'd definitely love to hear from you guys. I love having those nostalgic conversations with all of you. But anyway, as always, massive shout out, thank you to all the Patreons and channel members, thank you to all the low ball tier, and a bigger shout out, thank you to all the vid ball tier, my last team and animated this shit that's on the tier, Ron Vince, on the C-Scroll, thank you guys so much, you guys are literal legends, I love you. Thank you guys for watching, have an amazing day, stay beautiful, I love you all, peace.